much that I want to give you guys one of them. So to win a torque wrench just like this, what's going on, guys? So today, my beard and I are going to be walking you through the process of balancing a dirt bike wheel. Now I'm going to break this down as simple as possible so any of you can do this at home. So stay tuned. So what is balancing a wheel, or as many call it, truing a wheel? It's basically taking all of the wobble out of the wheel, whether that's side-to-side movement or up and down movement, and we correct this by either tightening or loosening the spokes in a certain fashion. It really is that simple, so literally any of you guys could do this at home with minimal tools. Alright, so let me explain the basic concept of truing a wheel. So say if you have side-to-side wobble, how we're going to correct that is by tightening the spokes in the right area. So if your wheel is wobbling out to the right side or pulling out to the right side, we're going to tighten the spokes coming from the left side of the hub here, and that will bring the wheel back over center and straighten that out. It's really simple as that. And then for up and down wobble, say if you have a wobble that goes up right here in this portion of the rim, so you'll need to tighten the spokes in the area of the high spot, and that'll push the rim down toward the hub and correct that up and down wobble. So you can do your wheel truing on a truing stand like I have here, or you can do it on the bike as well. I'm gonna do the front wheel on the truing stand and then bust out the back wheel on the bike. Let me just say it's a lot easier to do your truing on a stand, but it's plenty doable to do it on the bike as well. So before you start truing, you wanna make sure your spokes are somewhat loose, but not loose to the point where the rim is wobbling on the hub. Looks like this one's pretty solid. So let's take a peek at this rim and see where we're out of balance. So we've got some definitely side-to-side movement out of it, and I believe some up and down as well. Yep, you can see a little up and down wobble. So the first thing I'm going to attack is the side-to-side movement here. On this truing stand, we have an indicator bar, so we're going to line that up with the rim to pinpoint exactly where the high and low spots are. So one thing I thought I would mention, if any of you guys have this truing stand, it's a Tusk one from Rocky Mountain. Great stand, by the way, but if you're gonna be truing smaller wheels on it, there's one little modification here you have to do to the indicator bar. So you can see when I tighten down the bar, it doesn't line up with the rim. Now on a full-size wheel, this wouldn't be an issue at all, but my solution to that is to pull out the bar, loosen this up a little bit, and put a little cardboard shim behind it, and that'll allow you to tighten down the indicator bar so it actually lines up with the wheel. So now with the cardboard shim, you can tighten that down, bring it over to the wheel, and it lines up. So just a little tip for you guys that have one of these truing stands. So now we can see exactly where the high and low spots are on the rim. So that's a low spot. We're gonna find the high spot here, right about there. And to correct that, we're gonna make sure the spokes coming from this side of the hub are loose, about 4 or 5 of them, and then come over to this side and tighten about 4 or 5 spokes coming from this side of the hub. And the key here is to go only about a half a turn or maybe a full turn. The littlest tweaks make the biggest difference. Now we're gonna grab a spoke wrench and fix this thing up. The wrench I'm using has multiple sizes here, super handy to have. I'll have it linked down below in the description. All right, we're at the middle of the high spot here, and I'm gonna loosen up 4 spokes coming from the left side of the hub. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Looks like these ones are already loose. Give this one a few turns out. And then I'm gonna tighten 4 spokes coming from the right side of the hub. So these 4 right here. Go a half a turn on that one. And if these things are loose enough to turn by hand, just get them snugged up and then do half a turn. All right, let's see if that made a difference. No, but still pretty far out of whack. We're gonna have to do a full turn on this one. Gonna find the high spot again, right there. We are gonna go full turn this time. Definitely getting better. This could take 4 or 5 different adjustments to get it close. Once again, the key here is be patient and just make little tweaks at a time. You don't want to play the game where you're going overboard and shifting the rim from one side to the other and just going back and forth. And also, I would recommend flipping the rim around on the stand every 2 or 3 tweaks. That way you're not pulling the rim way over to one side and messing up the offset. Looks like we're still about 3 or 4 millimeters off. Gonna find the high spot right about there. Just a couple more tweaks and this thing will be pretty close. After a couple tweaks, we got this wheel spinning pretty good. Got basically all of the side-to-side movement out. But keep in mind, when you're truing up a wheel for a dirt bike, you're gonna be riding the bike on uneven terrain, with bumps and holes and ruts and whatever. And so you don't need the wheel to be perfectly true. And honestly, dirt bike wheels aren't really manufactured to the spec to where you're gonna get it, within a millimeter of runout. The typical runout spec for most wheels is gonna be 2 millimeters. So that's 2 millimeters of side-to-side movement, which this wheel probably has. Maybe a little bit less than that. So yeah, don't expect to get your wheels perfectly true. Now, if these were for a street bike or supermoto, I would definitely spend the time to dial them in as much as possible. But for a dirt bike, doesn't matter quite as much. Now that we've got all the side-to-side wobble out of this wheel, we're going to attack the up and down movement. We'll see how much we're working with here. We've got a little bit of up and down wobble there. So let's pinpoint exactly where that movement is using the indicator bar. So we're gonna bring this bar down to the bottom of the rim, pull it down a little bit, slide it over. So not a ton of up and down movement, but something we definitely wanna correct. Let's find out exactly where this wheel is out of balance. So right there is where it dips down. We're gonna tighten the spokes coming from both sides of the hub in that exact spot, and that'll bring the wheel or the rim closer to the hub, and that'll correct that problem area. So the highest point was right here. So I'm gonna tighten 3 spokes on each side of that, so 6 spokes in total. And you always wanna use an even number, that way it doesn't pull the wheel out of balance from side to side. We're gonna give each of these spokes about a half of a turn. There's number 2, number 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're gonna see if that corrected it. Honestly, this wheel wasn't that far out of true from up and down, so it ain't gonna take a whole lot to fix it. In order to correct the up and down movement to the wheel, sometimes you might have to loosen up the spokes opposite of the high spot. So up here, loosen about 6 to 8 spokes up here, and that'll allow the wheel to shift the way you need it. Got a little bit of play there, but that's definitely within spec. And another thing to consider here is dirt bike rims always have a seam in them. That seam is right here on this wheel. You can see that's a welded seam. And that seam is always like a dip in the rim, or sometimes it'll come out to one side or the other. And so that will throw your truing off as well. But for the most part, that's about as good as you're gonna get for a dirt bike wheel. Once you're done straightening out the up and down wobble of the wheel, you'll wanna check the side to side movement once again. So looks like this one stayed in spec, so we're good to go. The next thing we're gonna check is the wheel offset. Now the wheel offset is basically how centered the rim is in relation to the hub. So obviously you want the rim in the very center of the hub. So for this particular wheel or this particular bike, the factory service manual doesn't give a spec on wheel offset. It's a little kid's trail bike, so really isn't that important. They don't go that deep into it. But on any full-size bike, if you look at the factory service manual, they'll provide you with that spec. Just a few pointers on this truing stand if you guys have one or end up picking one up. This is how you set it up. So you want the collars to be tight on either side of the hub. That way the wheel stays exactly where you want it on the stand, doesn't shift from side to side. And then the collars on the end, you want those just snug against the edges of the stand. if you go too tight, the axle will actually bind and the wheel won't spin very well. So back to the wheel offset. Typically you're going to measure that from the edge of the hub, which is on the table, to the edge of the rim. So this gap right here. And since we don't have the spec for it, we can't really set the wheel offset on this wheel. So in the event you need to adjust your wheel offset, what you can do, if your spokes are loose enough, you can push with both hands on the rim with the wheel on the table, and that should shift the rim on the hub. And if that doesn't work, you're gonna have to loosen up your spokes just a little bit and make sure you do that evenly. Now that we've got the wheel completely trued, I'm gonna go over how to do the final tighten on all the spokes without affecting the wheel balance. Now, the very best way to do the final tightening on the wheel is to use a spoke torque wrench. Now, this will do a good job of tightening evenly and ensure you're not over tightening or under tightening. The wrench I'm using is a Tusk brand from Rocky Mountain. Pretty pumped to try this thing out. Let's go ahead and set up this torque wrench. I believe we're going to be using 5mm head for this particular wheel. Looks like the tip just pops right in here. Nice solid fitment. And obviously, in order to torque your spokes, you're going to need to know your spoke torque spec. For this wheel, that is going to be 25 inch-pounds. You're gonna slide down the little sleeve, spin it around. So that right there is 30. Back it down 5, and that'll be 25. And once you release the sleeve, just locks the spec right there. So if you don't know your torque spec for your particular bike, you can either Google it, find it on a forum, something like that, or what I would recommend doing if you're working on your bike quite a bit is just go pick up a factory service manual. It'll give you the torque spec for every single bolt on your bike and save you a ton of headache. So like I was saying, the torque spec for this wheel is 25 inch-pounds, and we're gonna wanna torque the spokes evenly. So how we're gonna do that is find the hole on the rim here. This is the hole for the tube. We're gonna tighten this spoke, skip 2 spokes, tighten this one, skip 2 more, tighten, follow that same pattern all the way around the rim, come back to the valve stem hole right here, and then go to the second spoke, torque that to spec, skip 2, torque, skip 2, torque. Do that same thing around the rim until you come back to the hole, and then jump to the third spoke, same pattern once again all the way around. And once you do that, you will have hit every single spoke evenly, and that's the way to torque the spokes without throwing the wheel out of balance again. All right, dudes, let's test this thing out, see how she goes. At the first spoke here, gonna go until it clicks. I'm like waiting for it, kind of nervous. See if it's gonna work. Oh, there we go. Looks like we're at 25. That's where the wrench kind of pivots or locks out at the head. Gonna skip 2 spokes. There's 25, skip another 2. Oh, this thing works pretty good. And it's nice how secure the head is on the spoke too, on the spoke nipple. Doesn't feel like it's gonna strip it or anything. All right, just gonna torque this thing like I was explaining to you guys a little earlier. Now that we're all done torquing, gonna spin this thing, make sure it's still straight. Oh yeah, that's buttery. It's about as good as it gets right there. So we're all finished up with this wheel. And then when you're done torquing the wheel, make sure you spin the torque wrench back to 0 to keep this thing accurate for many years to come. To be honest with you guys, pretty impressed with this torque wrench. For the price, you definitely can't beat it. So much that I want to give you guys one of them. So to win a torque wrench just like this, Tusk one, they can be found at Rocky Mountain. All you have to do is go down in the comment section and comment, we're gonna go Tusk, so T-U-S-K. And in the next video, I am going to pick the winner for it. So once again, no strings attached, just comment Tusk, and I'm going to pick the winner and have Rocky Mountain ship you one of these. So have at it, boys. Now for you tightwads that aren't going to sack up and buy a torque wrench, here's what you can do. Basically, we're going to tighten the spokes based on sound. So when you tap the spoke, they produce a different sound based on how tight they are. So obviously you can hear when it's tight, it has like a tense sound, like a ting. And I'm gonna loosen up the spoke and kind of show you what it would sound at different tightnesses, if that's even a word. Right now the spoke is completely loose. I can just turn the nipple by hand and it's gonna have a pretty dead sound to it. Tighten it up a little bit, give it a few turns, maybe like half of where it should be. The torque spec on most spokes is gonna be anywhere from 2 to 4 foot-pounds, so I'm gonna go at about to 1 foot-pound and see how it sounds. Still got a dead sound to it, nothing like the ting we're looking for like with this spoke. So a couple more turns. I would say that's pretty close right there. As you can see, it is possible to do it by sound, but then again, you're just guessing. So it's never gonna be quite as accurate as a torque wrench. Now that we've got the front wheel completely done and trued up, I'm gonna move on to the rear wheel. And as promised, I'm gonna show you guys how to true this one on the bike for all you cheap bastards out there. No judgment though, I did the same thing for many years before I scraped up enough money to buy a truing stand. So we're gonna have to assemble it just like we were putting the wheel on the bike. Pop the spacer in, put the brake panel on. Of course, if you're working with a bike with disc brakes, you're gonna have a brake caliper instead. And then just simply get this thing on the bike. Be kind of cool to see how this thing looks on here anyways. Man, that is so fresh, but it's gonna make the rest of the bike look like crap now. So in order to do this on the bike, we're gonna need a spoke wrench obviously, and then something plastic, either like a marker or something like a plastic tool like that. Something that won't scratch the rim. So it's the same exact concept as the touring stand. Think of the swing arm or the forks as the stand itself, and then the marker as the indicator bar. So we're just gonna hold the marker tight against the swing arm here, spin the wheel around, and we'll be able to see where the high and low spots are in relation to the marker. So nothing too crazy here, just takes a little extra time and diligence to get it right. Let's see how far out of whack this one is. Just like the front wheel, it's got some good side-to-side movement. Not really much in the way of up and down, so that'll make it a little easier. Just like earlier, we're gonna spin the wheel around, find the high spot, which looks like it's right there. Gonna rotate the wheel back, so we're gonna make sure 4 spokes are loose on this side, and then go over to the opposite side of the rim, or the spokes coming from the left side of the hub. Tighten these ones up a full turn. Try to pull that rim back over. Go ahead and check that again and see where we're at now. Getting a little bit better. Just gonna take about 4 or 5 tweaks to get this thing close. So like I was saying with the front wheel on the touring stand, you don't always want to be pulling the wheel to one side. About every 2 to 3 adjustments, either flip the wheel around on the stand, or in this case, I'm going to be looking for the low spots instead of the high spots now. That way I'm pulling the rim to this side, whereas the previous couple adjustments I was pulling it to the left side. So if you don't change the direction in which you're pulling the rim, you'll end up with kind of a wacky offset. Check out how close I got this thing. I would say that's pretty good for truing on the bike. Now I'm going to check the up and down movement here. We're going to do the same thing. Just take a marker. Looks like we got a little bit of up and down play. Should be able to correct that pretty easily. Just gonna locate the high spot here, right about there. Take my spoke wrench, tighten down the spokes right in this area. I'm gonna give each one about a half a turn. All right, I think we got her dialed. Sweet, looking pretty good. Not too bad for truing on the bike, huh? So I'll just need to torque those spokes and we'll be golden. So it's really up to you guys what tools you want to use for the truing process. Obviously, to make your job as easy as possible, pick up a truing stand, a torque wrench. You'll need a spoke wrench either way. But for you guys that don't mind spending a little extra time and maybe some frustration, it's plenty possible to do it on the bike as well. So either way, down in the description, I'll link the truing stand, the torque wrench, spoke wrench, and maybe a case of brew for some of you guys, since it might take a couple hours to do. Now I'm gonna give this torque wrench a rip around the rear wheel, and then from here on out, it's all on you guys. I've taught you pretty much everything I know about touring wheels. One thing I thought I'd mention to you guys, if you build a wheel from the ground up, one thing you'll notice is after the first ride or two, the spokes will start to loosen up, so you'll definitely want to check them. And then from then on out, every say 4 to 5 rides, I would go through and check the spokes as just normal maintenance. So that's gonna be it for this video. Really appreciate you guys watching it, and all I ask in return for me sharing all this free information with you guys, don't even charge a dime. I really should start charging you though. But anyways, all I ask in return is that you share the video with your friends or on social media if you enjoyed it or learned something new. Sounds like a fair trade, right? Once again, thank you guys so much, and until next time, keep it prime.